We enter into the book of Exodus with a new king rising over Egypt, a king who did not know Joseph, a king who did not have Hebrew friends to assuage the derogatory stereotypes undergirding all of public life, a community who claimed to worship the God of life, the creator God, right? These Hebrews, they lived out their blessing to be fruitful and multiply with abundance and joy. They had many children, cultivated a life, a flourishing community. They were teeming with life, the Hebrews. But it seems Pharaoh didn't feel like his life or the life of the Egyptians was teeming with life. So it must be that they, those wicked Hebrew people, are stealing from us. So if we deal shrewdly with them, if we snuff their life out, there will be enough life for us, finally. In these first few lines in the story, as so many stories go for the people of God, Pharaoh enacts a new policy against them. Kill all Hebrew baby boys on the birth stool. Midwives who've been delivering life into the world for their whole careers were now required to become killers. Midwives, Hebrews, who serve the God of life, who heard a call to usher life into the world, who tend to the lives of mothers and infants in great moments of precarity, who regularly stand at the door between life and death, and do everything in their power to push the odds toward life for mother and child. Midwives were demanded to usher infants into death unnecessarily. But Shifra and Pua and the others I imagined that they organized, they serve the God of life. They do not bring about death, and they allow the boys to live. They stay under Pharaoh's radar by concocting a story, leaning into his predisposed stereotypes of the Hebrews. The Hebrew women are so vigorous. They are so full of life. We can't even get to the women before the babies are born. Oops, we can't comply. Sorry. The midwives outmaneuvered Pharaoh on the birth stool. They kept Pharaoh's policy out of the birthing suite. They utilized his ignorance about birth and the affairs of women. They used that against him. They outmaneuvered him this time. But the midwives cannot ensure a perfect future for these boys, or that no harm will come their way 5 minutes from now. But while in their care, they preserve and protect life. They let them live. Having been outmaneuvered, Pharaoh comes after these boys again with a new policy, this time not limited to the midwives, but it is invitational and directive to all his people. Every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall throw into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. So we've now enacted vigilantism in Egypt. Everyone is now an agent of the state, an agent of death, policing the Hebrews. To us, this is a particularly feminist story, right? It is a story of women as heroes, and we'd assume that the female children would be targeted. We know those stories. So why are only the boy children, the male children, being targeted by Pharaoh? I'll tell you why. Because conquering a people requires killing the men and trafficking and forcibly impregnating the women by Egyptian men so that the future generation is at least half Egyptian. Conquering a people, erasing a people, requires economic, political, social, ethnic, familial, reproductive, sexual, and self-expressive annihilation. The girl's death would be after forced impregnation and birth of more people that they can enslave, who now have divided loyalty. Conquering a people, dealing shrewdly with a people, is in service only of the powers of death. The goal here, without saying it, was the elimination of the Hebrew people. Dealing shrewdly with a people is code for genocide, for conquest. It is an act that serves the God of death, not the God of life, the living God, the God whose name is the breath of life, Yahweh, our God. It is likely not clear to Pharaoh, but he serves a God of death. Jochebed, Moses' mother, is demanded to throw her own son into the Nile. Since he was a boy who made it through birth alive, miraculously, thanks to the midwives like Shiphrah and Puah. But Jochebed serves the God of life. Pharaoh's people, indoctrinated into this cult of death, this worship of the gods of death, seek out these little boys to kill. And they must be following orders for Jochebed to do what she does, to put him in the river. The Egyptians, probably not all of them, but so many of them that we don't hear any stories of anyone being the exception. The Egyptians are all throwing the babies into the river. So Jochebed knows if Moses stays with her, he will surely die. So she does something almost unimaginable in a time of peace. But in the circumstance of life under this death cult, it's all she can do. She makes a basket as waterproof as she can, a basket that floats on top of the Nile, and she sets her 3-month-old son in the basket. She preserves his life for as long as she can, and she sets him out into a river that might swallow him up, but in a basket, his only chance of survival, hopeful that perhaps he'll maybe float to a different country where someone else will preserve his life. She outmaneuvered Pharaoh for this moment, but Jochebed cannot ensure a perfect future for her son, or that no harm will come his way even 5 minutes from now. But while in her care, she preserves and protects life. She lets him live. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum made a documentary in 2000 called Into the Arms of Strangers, Stories of the Kindertransport, which is about the British rescue mission or operation known as Kindertransport, which saved the lives of over 10,000 Jewish and other children from Nazi Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia, and Danzig by transporting them via train, boat, and plane to Great Britain. Children who were transported were interviewed for the documentary, now as adults telling the story through their own experiences. It's a great film, and you should watch it. But I want to tell you the story of one of those children. Her name is Lori. Lori, now in her 60s or 70s at the time of filming, tells of her veteran Jewish father, who was mostly left alone by the Nazis at the start of the regime because of his veteran status. But after Kristallnacht, where all the Jewish-owned businesses were vandalized, looted, and destroyed, Lori's family had to come to terms with the fact that they would eventually come for them too. Emigrating out of Germany, though, as a family could take years, and resources they didn't have, so they decided to put Lori on the Kindertransport, put her on a train that would take her to Great Britain, giving her a chance at life with another family until hopefully her parents could join her. So they went to the train station, got her settled with her things in her seat, and they lowered the window, the big window at her seat, so that her parents could wave and talk with her while they stood on the platform before she left, right? So they could say one more goodbye. It's unimaginable, really, to consider putting your child on a train to another country, to another family, when you, yourself, are standing here, alive and well, with a heart full of love for your child. But thousands of Jewish parents did just that, to let their children live. Lori's dad, though, couldn't do it. Holding her little hands through the window as the train started to move, he didn't let go. He didn't let her live. He didn't let her go live. He pulled her by the hands out of the window, down onto the train platform, where she fell, got hurt, and where she remained in the lion's den. By the end of the war, Lori had been interned in 8 concentration camps and weighed 54 pounds. She was alive, but barely. And the suffering she endured in Nazi Germany is unfathomable. Lori's dad did not make the decision that the Midwives did or that Jochebed did, and he didn't make the decision that the Nazis did, to be clear. But he did compromise his commitment as a person who serves the God of life in some way. And we remember stories like this one of Lori's dad and the one of the Midwives, because they are always instructive. They seem to be always relevant. I don't think that the people in this room here often make the same decisions as Nazis or as the people who threw the babies in the river. But I think we often make decisions like the one that Lori's dad made. We don't overtly, openly serve the God of death, but we can, with all good intentions, compromise our commitment to the God of life. We can stand in the way of life being allowed. We can stand in the way of life being allowed to flourish. We can hinder our children and our friends and our family members and one another from becoming all that God is cultivating us to be. We can poo-poo and dismiss and scoff and drag our feet and yank each other out of moving trains that are going somewhere good and fine. Because it might not be perfect. It might not be the life we imagined for them. We hem and we haw about the merits of gender-affirming care. Then we count the number of trans folks who die by suicide and murder. We keep our mouths shut because we don't want to cause conflict when our neighbors spout racist or Christian nationalist rhetoric. And then we drop our jaws when we see Christian nationalists storm the Capitol. We don't maneuver out from under oppressive policies. We just grieve or tisk-tisk. We often only psychologically maneuver ourselves out from any responsibility for what has happened or how to respond. I do this too, to be clear. We might not be throwing babies in the river, but we aren't building a fence at the river either. We might not be looting Jewish businesses, but we aren't intervening when the neighbors use derogatory language for them. So as people who have committed ourselves, you're here, you've committed yourself to the God of life. People who understand that we are children born from that life, who have the breath of God in us, who understand all of breath to be that of God's. We must resolutely position ourselves against the gods of death, which today we can name as greed, transphobia, homophobia, racism, Christian nationalism, white supremacy. Like the Midwives, like Jochebed, like Pharaoh's daughter, we must commit ourselves ultimately and fundamentally to the preservation and the cultivation of life for all of God's children. Commitment to the gods of death is death dealing in and of itself. And so also on behalf of all of those who are somehow ensnared by these vicious death-dealing powers who've bought into that story, for them too, we must weed it out so that they too can live. For me, one of the things that helps me keep my eyes on the God of life is music, it's song. Having an anthem, a mantra, a chant, a clever and easily remember refrain to repeat and repeat again and again. It reminds me that because I serve the God of life, I am not alone. I'm not singing those songs on my own. I do not defy the gods of death on my own. I can believe that the world truly is about to turn, because with all the people of goodwill, all the people dedicated to the service of the God of life, we will turn it around together with God, with the God who gives life force, the God of power. Our song earlier, "Let the king beware, for your justice tears every tyrant from its throne." The world is about to turn. Friends, we are servants representatives, children, heirs to the God of life. God's life is within us. So let all that is within us preserve and foster life. May all we do be in service to the God of life. Amen.